I want to show you the governors, Charlie Sykes, bragging about how secure their elections were, while they are now signing into law voter suppression laws to deal with how insecure their elections were. Let's start with that tape. Let's see that.
The people are actually looking at Florida and asking the question, why can't these states be more like Florida? Florida was able to handle 11 million ballots. The way Florida did it, I think inspires confidence. I think that's how elections should be run. Me signing this bill here says, Florida, your vote counts. Your vote is going to be cast with integrity and transparency.
As I've said before, we do elections well here in Arizona. The system is strong, and that's why I have bragged on it so much. This bill is simple. It's all about election integrity.
I mean, look at Texas, Florida, and Ohio. We didn't have any problem counting all of our mail-in ballots, and we have more mail-in ballots than anyone. The bill is needed because Americans no longer trust the system. In a country where voters do not trust the system is a country in peril.
Charlie Sykes, I'm going to play that every day until I get tired of it. These Republicans told everybody that their election results could be trusted because they were in charge and they were so good, they were models. Now they were signing laws based on lies that they know are lies because they told the world they are lies.
Well, think about how fast this has accelerated since November. We thought that the country was divided and that we were a post-fact society, and it has moved quite a distance because this has now become the heart and soul, the beating heart of the Republican Party is to embrace this big lie, to cast doubt on the election, and to use that then as an excuse to change the laws. And, you know, as we've said before, you know, we can roll our eyes and treat the Arizona audit as a joke, but a clown with a flamethrower still has a flamethrower. And the danger of this is that this is spreading from state to state. And as those sound bites illustrate, you don't actually need to have any evidence that there was a problem for the Republican governors and legislatures to embrace the big lie, to embrace the theories, or to go in and begin to change that. We are post-evidence. There is no logical connection to it, except that this has become gospel in the Republican Party. And it is not just Arizona. I think that the latest count, you had legislators from 7 states visit this Arizona audit. So what you're seeing here is about to metastasize across the country.
You know, Jason, I think there's something exasperating for our viewers and for people I talk to not on television as well about this dynamic. But it doesn't have to be this way. The whole thing, the whole wave of voter suppression laws can be undone by one piece of legislation. And I think the letter from Arizona Democrats that we mentioned in the lead to Kyrsten Sinema puts her on the spot. She either sees no evil in her own state, hears no evil, isn't aware that this has become like a wacko's mecca here, this fake recount in Arizona, and she has no interest in changing a tradition in the Senate to do something about it.
Yeah, Senator Sinema, Nicolle, is in a very different position than, say, Joe Manchin. And it's not just because the Democratic Party in Arizona is much more organized and can actually show some victories in the last couple of years. What they're pointing out is her argument, her justification for being in power. Remember, when Sinema first won her Senate seat, she basically ran saying, I'm the only kind of Democrat that can get elected in Arizona. So you have to deal with my quirky attitude and my occasional inconsistencies about policy because that's what Arizona wants. Well, okay, now they have put in Mark Kelly. Now Arizona has flipped blue. And you're not the only kind of Democrat who can win in this state. So you have to actually listen to your constituents, not just the independents and right wingers, but also Democrats. So this is the kind of pressure that I think could end up making a difference with her. But again, it's just one vote. Unless it also turns into some sort of push on Joe Manchin, you need both of these Democratic senators to actually care about democracy more than their own pocketbooks or their own egos in order to make a difference and stop these ridiculous attempts to overturn an election that are happening around the country.
Let me just follow up. Why can't a group of people who care about democracy, Jason, make the filibuster so toxic that it's a political vulnerability for sort of moderate or endangered senators in both parties? Why can't it become this impediment to access to the right to vote, an impediment to not living in a country where everyone is armed and dangerous? Why can't a campaign be launched by people in both parties to make people understand that the filibuster stands in the way of bills with 60, 70, 80, 90% public support?
Well, that can be done. The question is going to be whether or not that moves the senators, right? And like I said, I think Kristen Sinema, look, and I want this to be clear. This is not in any sort of way about age, experience, or gender, or anything else like that. I think Kristen Sinema's position is much less defensible than, say, Joe Manchin. I think Joe Manchin is doing this because he knows he doesn't have to get reelected, and because it's ego and it's power, and he's always like sort of being the contrarian guy. He didn't even like Obama. This has been his attitude all along. Sinema, I think, is just doing this because she likes to be different. I don't see as much substance behind what she's saying. So a national campaign probably will work on her. In fact, just being threatened, people who I know in Arizona say, look, people are lining up to primary her already, right? But I don't know that that will necessarily work on Joe Manchin. When Manchin decided to sort of hide his message last week and write that little note, that was basically giving the middle finger to the Democratic Party, to Joe Biden, who he's had a great relationship with for years, and to American democracy in general. And I don't know if a national campaign or a Moral Monday march or any of those things are going to change his mind at this point. But Sinema, yeah, I think she can flip.
Ryan, President Biden on a foreign trip, expected to meet in a few more days with Russian President Vladimir Putin. And what is on Russian President Vladimir Putin's mind are our problems here at home with democracy, which brings us to the Maricopa County audit. Tell us the latest.
Well, they say they're going to finish up counting within a couple of days, but it's still going to take possibly weeks to examine the ballots. We don't really know what that means, what they might be looking for today. They've got tables around the outside of the arena there where they have cameras set up. Previously they told us they were looking for bamboo fibers, as you noted, and for a period of time they had UV lights. But we just don't really know all of the techniques that they're using to, review the ballots after they're done counting the ballots.
What is the dynamic? I mean, you brought us some really vivid color from inside the room of the kinds of people that were involved. Has there been any turnover? Is Cyber Ninja still at the helm? The founder is a conspiracy theorist adherent. There are now Republicans, allies of the disgraced ex-president, traveling to Maricopa to observe, ostensibly to replicate it in their own states. What does that look like? Is it like a tourist venue? Are they VIP tours? Tell us what that dynamic is like.
Well, the Arizona audit appears to be a brand that these folks want to associate themselves with. So while the media is mostly restricted to the 19th row in the Coliseum, these folks from other states, lawmakers or hopeful lawmakers and governors, get to tour the floor. They get to see behind the scenes down there. And then some of them do choose to give press interviews. And I have to believe that's because they think this brand is going to sell with their voters back home. So they're really making a big show of who's coming to town. We have lawmakers in Arizona who support this audit, who, announce it. Like, I'm cleared to announce now that we will have a delegation from this next state to really sort of build up the suspense on who's coming next and, really give a platform to these folks to show basically that they are still aligned with President Trump. It's hard to do that in another way when he's out of office, but you can come to Arizona and show that you still are a Trump loyalist.